And it's me, Tarek, and
It's me, Doug Johnson.
okay. So I thought today, because we haven't really introduced ourselves in any way, and it's me and you. When we peel the layers back, as I said on that little thing on Instagram, it's just a brown guy and a white guy.
That's what they see.
So I was thinking, let's explore that question. One of the things that we were talking about earlier on was this idea of where you're from. Right. And so what does that mean to you? What does that mean? Where are you from?
Well, it's always been problematic for me. Of course, I'm from the U.S., but I never really had a strong sense of belonging there because I was always aware that, I'm not indigenous and I had...
What do you mean not indigenous?
I'm not a Native American.
Yeah.
And...
so you're a foreigner, basically.
Yeah, but we were not considered foreigners. And that was a weird concept for me. I felt that I was missing a lot because I wasn't in touch with our heritage from Europe. And
so that's where you're originally from.
That's right.
Your family.
That's right. I have the two sides of my family. One side comes from Norway and the Czech Republic, the Czechoslovakia then.
Yeah.
And that's on my father's side. And then on my mother's side, it was Scottish and English, I believe.
Yeah. And
really not a lot of knowledge about any particulars, but I know at least that much, I think.
Yeah.
And, I don't feel, I wouldn't feel at home if I went there. And
you never quite felt home in America?
I didn't. I'm not speaking on behalf of most Americans, but yeah, for me, I just felt uneasy there.
Yeah.
I felt...
the word you used was you felt marginalized.
Definitely. It's because of situations in my childhood, of course, and growing up. But yeah, I always felt, even though I'm white and privileged in America, I felt marginalized.
Yeah.
And not really...
not part of the center.
Not part of the center and not really in agreement with what the U.S. was doing, and I didn't want to be a part of it, in fact. So it was problematic for me.
Yeah, that's interesting because, in general, people see, white Americans as being quite at home with who they are, right? In the sense that, they're patriotic, they're nationalist, they're very at home with the American flag and the Star-Spangled Banner.
Yeah, and I find all of that very ugly.
Yeah.
And have for quite some time. So, yeah, it's disturbing.
Yes. From my perspective, it's a little bit different because I've always felt the same way. When I was asked that question, where are you from? It always...
Okay, so we have a lighting issue. All right.
I can cut that.
All right. Oh, I see. All right.
Okay, that's good. It gives that kind of amateur flavor. Yeah, so where was I? Yeah, when I was asked that question...
What question?
Where are you from?
Okay.
So when I was in the UK and someone asked me that question, it always disturbed me, and I've heard this discussion lately, about ethnic minorities in the UK. They feel very disturbed when they hear that question. And there's a reason for that, because whenever I was asked that question...
Well, you should say where you're from.
Well, again, it's a difficult question because, we all like that. Like you said, you were born in a particular place, but your heritage is somewhere else. And the same with me. I was born in Coventry, England.
Yeah.
But I spent most of my life in Scotland. And I moved around a lot in the UK. So I stayed a while in Newcastle. I stayed a little while in London. I studied in London. And then I was in Pakistan for a year when I was like 16. And for the last 20 plus years, I've been in different countries,
Yeah.
So when you say, where are you from? It's this whole concoction of different ideas, different cultures you've experienced, different sets of alliances you feel. So when I was in the UK and someone asked me that question, it was difficult for me. But the thing that used to get me about that question, I mean, I don't feel uncomfortable answering that question. I never felt uncomfortable answering that question anywhere else. So if I was in Jordan, Palestine, Spain, Pakistan, Oman, it never disturbed me. But when I heard that question in the UK, it gave me this sense in which I didn't belong.
And yet you were born there.
Yeah, born there, raised there, and I would say, I'm quite in touch with the culture of the UK, if there is such a thing. So, I mean, I felt I was part of that narrative, that story. So when someone asked me, where are you from? And that always leads to a secondary question, because if you said, I'm from Coventry, they would say, well, where are you really from?
And your accent is British.
Yeah.
And so there's only one reason why they would single you out to ask.
Yeah. Well, that's the secondary question. Where are you really from? And that question, where are you really from, stems from a race question. It's why are you the color you are? Right? That's the question, basically, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny because I didn't really look at it very deeply for a very long time. I used to think, why do I feel uncomfortable with that question? And then retrospectively now looking back and having lived in different countries and different places and interacted with different cultures, I see that now, because there was a book I read many years ago called There Ain't No Black in the Union Jack, and it was a series of essays. And it was about this experience that people, non-white in the UK have, that they never feel quite part of the story. And in different ways, they're excluded or marginalized or alienated or made to feel that way. And I know that isn't an important question to a lot of people, It isn't an important question. For example, I don't know for you, if someone said to you, where are you from? And you were in the US, you would just say, I'm from Ottawa, Illinois.
No one has ever asked me where you're from, unless it was, what city did you live in before?
Yeah.
But if you're darker skinned color, you will be asked that in the US, meaning, implying that you're not really American. In a sense.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. I think that's why that question. So for me, where am I from? Well, from the UK born, but my parents were originally from Pakistan. They come from two different areas in Pakistan, both in the Punjab, but my mother comes from Lahore. My father came from a place called Toba Tek Singh. And they also have roots that go back somewhere else. Because I'm from a family called the Arai, and when you excavate the history of the Arai, they actually, there's a number of different stories, but the one I've always resonated is we came from Jericho.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Which in Palestine, in Arabic, it's Ariha.
That's amazing.
So, so there's a concoction of different things going on, but that sense of home and belonging. And I think that's a very fundamental question nowadays, because I wonder whether that question could be reframed and, recast as, tell me about you, who are you, rather than where are you from? Because when you're from somewhere, you're in a way, you're locating that person. You're trying in a way to stereotype them.
But it depends on their intentions.
Yeah, the intention is there because, some people can naturally be inquisitive.
Yeah.
And many people like that are naturally inquisitive.
Or they've visited the country they suspect they're, tied to in some, and there's...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so there is, the question isn't, and this is the other thing. I think we live in a very kind of divisive world. Yeah. In which, just the notion of some question being asked automatically, is framed as it's offensive or it's racist or something. I don't look at that question as racist, but I do see that it has an origin and an intent behind it. So if someone asks me in the UK, where are you from? I'm immediately defensive, because it may be referencing that the person either is saying that I don't belong, or they're trying to put me in some kind of box, which isn't the British box. You know, I'm outside that story.
That's right. The question really points to other. You are, they identify you as something other, and why you?
Yeah.
Why not them? Why not anybody?
Yeah. So, where are you from is, I've had experiences with it, and it works at different levels, So, for example, I remember being at a party once with a whole load of teachers, and there were these two guys. This was in Oman, and I think there were 8, 10 teachers. I was kind of holding audience, these people were all listening to what I love doing that.
You're good at that.
Yeah. And these two guys, these young guys, I think they were from Leeds maybe or something, Manchester maybe. And they were saying, they were listening. And then one of them said, where are you from? And I said, I'm from Coventry. Without a second thought, I said, I'm from Coventry, England. And he said, no, I mean before that. And I said, there isn't a before that. That's where I'm from. I was born in Walsgrave Hospital, Coventry. And he said, yeah, I know that, but what I mean is, where are you really from? And I said, that's where I'm really from, And I then said, well, is it the color thing that you're saying? I can't quite, you can't rationalize how I could be this color and be born in the UK at the same time. Yeah. I mean, that's what it was. It says, no. It isn't that, no, I'm not saying anything. But how else can you square the question? Yeah. If you're asking where I'm from, I'm telling you where I'm from. But at the same time, that doesn't concord with you, that you've got to say, where are you really from? So the really is just a comment on color. Yeah. It's saying, why are you the color you are, yet you're born in the UK? I mean, it's a contradiction, basically. But it works the other way. I was just thinking that it works the other way, because like me and you, we were in Cyprus a few times, and we've ordered a curry.
That's right. Remember? That's right.
And the waiters. What did the waiters say?
Every time I order food in a Pakistani restaurant, and the kitchen was run by Pakistanis.
That's right. Yeah.
And so it never fails. They're concerned that the food will be too hot for me. Yeah. As if there's something inherently different about my taste buds. I mean, I have to be fed really bland food. I don't know, because of my skin color. I don't know. And it really, I get annoyed by it. It's why?
Yeah, you got very annoyed that time, And a couple of times I've had to come to the rescue for you, haven't I? I've had to, even here in Oman, a couple of times I've been to restaurants, right?
Yeah.
And I've had to say in Punjabi, he eats hotter food than you guys.
Well, and I know that they're talking about that with you or whatever. I see them looking at me like, he wants to eat this food, this guy? It's like, what's wrong with that? I like good food.
Yeah.
And it's, for those of you who have not had good Pakistani curry, you need to check it out. I'm telling you. I mean, it's really, really good. Yeah. The first curry I ever had was actually with you and your family.
That's right.
And I was making sounds that were embarrassing. When I look back, it's like, I was just moaning. And your kids were looking at me like, what's wrong with this guy? But it was just amazing food. And anybody would like that if they just try it.
Yeah, but there again, you see, like now there, a lot of people in this kind of divisive world now, they're talking about different ways in which, drawing people together. But isn't that one of the best ways, is that you actually speak to each other? Or
hey, that'd work.
Isn't
that what a radical idea?
Yeah. But isn't it when you kind of peel away everything else? I mean, look, for example, you're talking about Pakistani food. How would you ever have a comment about that? How would you understand that if you didn't try it? And have a conversation around that. It's a very simple thing.
Yeah.
And I think people, they kind of get caught up and not understanding the kind of fundamentals. And one of the fundamentals is to sit with each other, to talk, to converse, to understand each other, to try and experience different cultures, to try and experience food,
Yeah.
to look into the traditions, the history. Everything seems alien until there's some kind of collective understanding of it.
Well, Jesus was, um, that's, what Jesus was about. He would bring people together for the purpose of eating. I mean, that's
right,
that's
yes.
how he made connections between the different classes and the underclass with the rest of the people. It's just everyone sat at the same table and ate, and it does. It's a boundary.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm saying. That sometimes in the simplicity of things, and so I mean, our relationship goes back a long way,
Yeah.
a long time, and in that time, I think I've learned a lot more about America. I mean, I've only been there once. I had a short stay there, but I mean, I've spoken to a lot of people, and they say you seem to touch the pulse of America, And I really think that is due to the conversations I've had with you. You know what I mean? I mean, I've listened intently to what it was like for you growing up in America, and we happened to meet in Palestine,
That's
and
right.
we were both, it was a kind of
Fugitives.
yeah, fugitives basically in a place in which there was conflict, there was war, and we happened to meet there. And in a way, I think it was just the ideal place because we were in Jenin, Palestine. Doug and I both worked in a university there. And in a way, I think most of the people who were there were fugitives in many ways. They left a lot of their baggage behind.
That's right.
And they were stripped clean.
Yeah.
And they were confronted by a very, harsh situation. And in a way, there was no room. In a way, it kind of stripped you of your ego to some extent. Have you ever looked at it like that? In a way that the problems were bigger than you, that you could see the kind of people and the things that you experienced there or saw reality. I certainly felt that. I felt that a lot of the, attachments and the thing that I'd been living in the UK all my life. And all of those attachments and ideas and materialism and all that just collapsed.
Well, I wrote my brother earlier. Hope he's watching. And I said something about how leaving the country allows you to step outside of the ideology.
Yeah.
And then, it becomes more conspicuous. And you begin to question everything when you see things working differently.
Yeah.
And it's all aspects of life that you've taken for granted your whole life. And Americans tend to think that everything American is the best.
Yeah.
And the
I think
food's the best.
Brits
and-
to some extent think
yeah.
that as well.
And you go out and you have, experiences that then you compare and you go, well, that works better. Maybe, in the U.S. they do this better, but here, and you just,
And
it's
you
a
work
total
out
realignment.
and you work out the logic of each culture. You get to understand why they do what they do.
Yeah.
You get what I mean?
That's
That's also an important question. Because sitting outside, you look into a culture as a kind of third party looking in, and you see things and you're not quite comfortable with them. You're like, well, that's not the way we do it. But then once you're inside that culture and you begin to see there's an inherent logic of the way things work,
Yeah.
It may be different, but it has its own logic, the same way that you might look at another culture and you might see clothing being different, language being different. And as soon as you start immersing yourself in that culture, that language, that clothing, those traditions, that history, everything seems to make sense at some. You still, you still have that discrimination, but what you feel comfortable with, but you understand where that's coming from as well. And I mean, I remember, going to Palestine, and originally, I mean, I was very used to spicy food. Pakistani cuisine is largely spicy, and so when I went to Palestine, for a while I was like, I'm not sure about the food. I need extra spice on it, but as time went on, I just began to love the food.
Yeah.
because I understood it was fresh. It was, had its own flavors, that kind of Mediterranean touch to it. And so what I mean to say is that, there are realities beyond the ones we see, and to explore them, to understand them, often takes a step outside your own comfort zone.
Yeah.
In a sense, like me and you being in Palestine, it was a little bit of a step outside. We were although you'd have been on a few things before that, like Iraq and Gaza and stuff.
I
right?
never went to Gaza, but I did go to Baghdad.
Baghdad,
Yeah.
that's right. But you had been to the West Bank, I think, or somewhere in
Oh
that
yeah,
region.
I went with an organization.
That's right. Yes, yeah.
So I'd spent a month there.
That's right. Yeah. So, I mean, you'd been in the area, in the region before. I hadn't been in the region. So for me, it was complete dislocation. And then, and I felt when I was there, yes, I got rid of the bag. Then we met. So how did we meet? Do you remember?
Very, very well. I was struggling with my boss over a number of issues. I mean,
you were in the English department,
That's
and
right.
I was in the language
That's
center.
right.
That's right. Yeah.
And we had not met. I'd heard about you through a couple of our mutual friends, but we hadn't met. And I was walking towards the language center, walking up a hill, and I saw you at the top of the hill.
And
you called out and you said, "Are you Doug?" And I was like, "Yes." And we started talking. You said, "I understand you have a problem, and maybe I can help you on that. And I hear you're doing good work and this and that." And
yeah.
So it was a fateful day.
Yeah. And then we used to spend a lot of nights in your apartment, talking about different things and just talking. There you go. I mean, it was talking, reasoning, understanding about different things. It was politics, culture, religion. And
we got into some heated arguments.
That's right.
I mean, I remember it. There were a couple of times I was screaming at you. Like,
that's right.
And I remember having breakthroughs in those moments, just like, an epiphany.
Yeah.
And just like, all right, I didn't know you could look at it that way, or
Yeah.
So these were
we had some very heated debates, arguments, discussions.
Yeah.
And so then we were there, and then we spent, I think we were there in 2005, and then I spent another year there. And then I left for Oman, and then Doug was the director. That's another story. We'll talk about that sometimes. And then Doug went, so he was there in Palestine for 2 years. I was there for 3.
Yeah.
You came in 2004.
I was there for 2.5 years.
2.5 years, yeah. And so then I came to Oman, and then maybe 6 months, a year later, you came to Oman, I think. Was it a year, 2 years later?
I think a year after you started working in Oman.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
And then you came here, and then you got a job. And then we've always met and discussed, and we've had a lot of different times together. Yeah. We have an apartment together in Cyprus, in northern Cyprus, and that we bought that about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And that was in furtherance of an idea. What was the idea?
Communal living. Yeah. That's right. It hasn't come to full fruition yet, but it's nearing that. Yeah.
We kind of had this idea that we'd buy this place and we'd kind of live there together, or try in our ways to try to make it a place which wasn't about ownership.
Yeah.
That it was more about that. I don't know whether it's kind of like a service in a way. I mean, servicing ourselves as well, in the sense that we would live there, but also other people could enjoy it.
Absolutely.
We could live a life that was free of. Yeah. It was an interesting idea. We're still trying to get that one together.
But it's looking like, it's in the near future.
Yeah. It's slowly getting there now. So all of that, tying it all together, I mean, in some ways, I guess, we've sat around, you're from the States, and let's get back to that question again. I mean, you're from the States, so where did you grow up?
So I was born in Terre Haute, Indiana, and its claim to fame is that is the execution capital of the United States. They execute more people there in their federal prison than I think any other place. And it's a boom to the economy, by the way. It's very interesting that when they do execute people, they get protests and on both sides.
Oh,
and,
right, those
and
pro-death penalty and anti-death penalty.
and the news media come in, and it's the businesses pick up.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's a really sick concept, that there's...
So businesses being driven by someone being executed.
And, in concert with these private prisons that receive taxpayer funds, but not through our consent. But anyway, so I lived there till I was 3, and then moved to Clinton, Iowa. My father had a degree in, I don't remember now.
Some kind of engineering.
Yeah, he was kind of doing engineering work. But anyway, he had a bachelor's degree, and he was just kind of hopping around, climbing the corporate ladder, and ended up in Ottawa, Illinois. I moved to Streator, Illinois, then Henderson, Kentucky, Streator, Illinois, and then Ottawa, Illinois. So I lived... By the time I arrived in Ottawa, I'd lived in, I think, 5 different places.
And what age were you then?
I was about 9 or 10, around, yeah. And then I was there until I graduated from high school. So I tell people I'm from a small town in the Midwest in Ottawa, Illinois. And it's...
What was Ottawa, Illinois like? Just the name, Ottawa, Illinois.
Well, it would have some French influences. I really don't know the history of that, but its claim to fame is that it was a site of the Lincoln-Douglas debates, one of the debates, and they have a monument there now to commemorate that, and it's on the Illinois River where it meets the Fox River, so there was a lot of barge traffic, a lot of river traffic for trade and so on back in the early days, and it's just a remnant of a gone era. I mean, it's a little cesspool of a place. Welcome, Ottawa residents. Welcome to our channel.
So, what was the population like there? I mean, give us a sense of this place.
I think the population went down.
Illinois.
I mean, if you can imagine.
A place where the population goes down. Because people are just literally crawling to get out of there.
Yeah.
But there must have been those who didn't crawl who are still there.
They're still there. And I went to a family reunion, a high school reunion, a number of years ago, and it was the only one I went to, and I stayed about an hour, and then I went.
Did you drive there or something? Where were you at that time?
I was in the States. I was still in the States at the time, so this is prior to 2003, and prior to I was around. I don't know what it was prior to 2003, and. I drove there. It wasn't far because I was living in Louisville, Kentucky. It was just a few hours, and and I went to the places where I had visited as a high school student, and in fact I ended up in a place called Berta's. It's a bar, and this is prior. We actually had our first meeting there in that bar. It was surprising because it was one of my haunts. I never drank alcohol there because I was too young, but I played pinball and actually hung out and talked with people there. And then I ordered a beer, and I said, I'd like a beer. Could you tell me what kind of beer you have? And proudly, the woman said, Miller Lite, Bud Light. And
that's the extent of your choice.
But she was proud of that. Hey, we got it all. And I said, well, do you have anything, maybe foreign, because I've had those beers and they're not good. Yeah. And she was offended by this and just rudely went over and started thrashing around in this ice that was never used. She had to dig down, and she pulled out a bottle of Molson and put it down. There you go. And
I mean, with a kind of aggression.
With aggression,
you trying to mess around
I put her through an ordeal. She had to go to this other cooler. And she said, that'll be $2.50. like, you fool, you could have had a beer for $1. What a fool you are. And so I gave her 4 and I said, there you go. And it was like, well, she was not.
After that, she would have been your best friend.
She was bringing me the Molsons.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, that's like a side story. That's kind of like Ottawa in a nutshell.
That's the Ottawa that's a metaphor.
Yeah,
for
that's Ottawa.
So that same bar was there when you were a kid.
Berta's,
and still there when you went back for the reunion.
And it was
probably the same people were still in it if you waited long enough.
Well, so I'm one of the first people I met, and he told me his name. I'm like, no. I looked, all right, and I don't remember his name, and I wouldn't want to say it, but I said, so what have you been up to? Where do you live now? And he pointed out the window, and he said, I live right down the street there. I was like, ooh, that
he
was...
had never left.
He's never left.
Physically or, psychologically.
And you could just kind of see it in his face. It's like, he's looking. And I was like, oh, man. And it just scared me.
So, like, what was it like growing up there? So it's this kind of Midwestern, kind of a nondescript type town, like other towns?
They're all the same. They're all
same.
White.
Yeah.
And
it's all white.
Well, you have your
you
have your token black.
Yeah.
I remember the black kid in my class.
And there was only one in the whole school.
I remember one. I remember one Hispanic and his sister, one family.
You must remember their names.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
You remember those two
names?
Yeah. Because everyone knew those names.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, and all white.
All white.
And, how many streets in that town were happening?
I mean, there was a north side and a south side, which was divided by the Illinois River. And they built a bridge. I think it was after I left, they built a more modern bridge. So it's good infrastructure. And
like a road bridge?
Yeah. But you can walk across it. They have on the sides. And the north side is where it's at, if you want to say where there's nothing there.
There's nothing there,
right.
Yeah.
There's little bars and stores that service people's needs, Anything you need within reason, you can get there, but there's not a lot of selection. And there's 2 main streets, really. One going in one direction, and then you do a loop, and it comes back the other direction. Right. And I don't remember the names of the street, but I remember, on a Friday night, you would get with your friends in a car, and you would do the loop.
And just keep going round and round.
I did. I mean, I don't know.
Just go round and round.
You go round and round and say things to people in the other cars because they're your classmates.
Everyone knew everyone. Right. So everyone knew everyone.
Yeah, basically. It was kind of like that. I mean, 18,000 people in this town. So it's not like everyone knew everyone, but it was
kind of like it was an intimate place. I mean, news would get around. Did it have a local paper?
Yeah, they did. And the stories would, be like, who won an award at the recent, meeting of the Moose Lodge or something.
So what was it like growing up there? How did you feel there? Was it... But you had a good childhood, I guess, in the terms of it was countryside and that kind of stuff.
Oh, I love that. Right? Yeah, that was... I took that for granted, and I look back, as I get older, I just realize what a wonderful gift that was, to be out in the country. I mean, it was clean, and I did nature walks in every direction, and it was
the fishing and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And the night sky was brilliant. You could really see the Milky Way. I haven't seen the Milky Way in years, to be honest with you.
So, I mean, growing up there, so it's like a kind of Midwestern town, fairly nondescript, 20,000 people. People in general know each other. But
it was a very angry place, I think, and people kind of knew that they were marginalized as a town.
But is it kind of like people don't get this sense about the States, I think, like this is what I saw when I went to New York, is that people get this sense because the projected image is one of affluence and wealth.
Yeah.
So this is what you see. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, as a kid growing up in the UK, that's what I saw. I didn't associate the US with poverty and destitution and exploitation. You just don't see it. So when I went to the States and I saw New York, I was just astounded by the disparity in wealth. You could go down Fifth Avenue and you would have gold-plated Rolls Royces. And these stores where you could literally, have a heart attack looking at the price of a cufflink, right? Right.
But
On
really,
one side,
yeah.
Bulgari and Chanel and all these stores, right? Massive. And you've got all these chauffeur-driven limos outside and these penthouse suites. You just look at them and just can't imagine what the astronomical price of them is. And then on the other hand, you just see the poverty. The homelessness, the drug addiction, and, the kind of day-to-day grind of people. I mean, I often went on the subway while I was there, and I would just see this kind of clockwork of people, just going to, you could literally see it in their faces that they were just sad, depressed, hopeless. They're getting into some crammed up subway and going to this useless job that barely pays minimum wage, if that, and they're going to be doing this 6 days a week. And you can just see the unhappiness. And that's the part I never really thought about. So, I mean, and a lot of these Midwestern towns are like that. And now they're kind of, a lot of them are under the kind of the curtain of this opioid addiction, and different levels.
Yeah. That's what sustains them now.
So was that was the place you were at? Did it have disparities in wealth, or was it all kind of a middle class type of place?
Well, this is back in the 1970s.
Yeah.
We moved there in 1968, I believe.
Yeah.
So it was in that period. There wasn't really poverty in that town that I remember, but I do remember emerging drug use, and I remember, I worked at a golf course, and I remember that some guys had stolen something, and I caught them and ended up having to identify them at the police station and stuff, and they were just drug addicts, and I started to become aware that there was some serious problems
Serious kind of social problems.
Yeah, that living out in the country I was not exposed to.
Yeah. So, I mean, we'll talk further about that, but my experience is probably kind of different in many ways because I grew up on the opposite end of the scale, So I grew up in a place called Foleshill, Coventry. And Foleshill, Coventry in the 70s, from what I recall, I mean, I lived on, a fairly well-to-do street. It was like a cul-de-sac. And, I was talking to Anila the other day, and I was saying I can pretty much remember everyone in that street. I can remember their names and the numbers of the houses. And it was a kind of mixed bunch, but it was largely, kind of Sikhs, Hindus, Muslims, and, all from Southeast Asia. And then a couple of Jamaicans and people from Trinidad and the West Indies. So that was, and it was a kind of, at that time when I was growing, it was probably 25% white and 75% non-white in that one street. And these were all fairly, they weren't middle class, I would say. They were all working people, but, largely working in factories and stuff. Maybe a few were self-employed. And the neighborhood, Foleshill itself, was largely that. That was the ethnic makeup of Foleshill. There weren't that many white people there. And so when I went to school, it was kind of balanced, I think, equally between whites and non-whites.
But where is it you went to school where you were in a mostly white school?
That was in Glasgow. So I was born in Coventry.
How many years later was that?
That was when I was 13.
Okay.
So for the first 13 years of my life, I was in Coventry. So that really crystallized a lot of opinions about things, I think, when I grew up there, because you know, it was a strange place because Coventry at that time was, in the early 70s, it was the central hub in the UK for the motor industry. You know, so you had all these factories there and mills and, you know, GEC were there, Courtaulds, the textile spinning place. You had Rolls-Royce, you had Chrysler, Leyland Daff, Peugeot, all these car companies. And then in the 70s, it all went to hell because Thatcher came in and, you know, I mean, the manufacturing industry just got destroyed. So it was really high unemployment there. And you know, and also I recall that in the kind of early 70s there, we had the kind of skinhead movement, you know, so you had a lot of the kind of national front, you know, and this thing called packy bashing.
Wow.
So people had to be a bit careful where they went and, you know, stay within areas. And I think, I mean, looking back, it was fairly segregated, you know, it was fairly segregated. We lived in quite a, you know, I mean, there were white people there. But I don't recall, and I often think about this, that, you know, we were talking about this earlier on, that this space for conversation, you know, never happened, you know. So we had neighbors and stuff and people in the street who were white, but, you know, we never mixed. There was no conversation. It was just a hello, goodbye. It was never, you know, there was no interaction. There was no crossing of cultures. There was no understanding. I think it was kind of underpinned by a kind of suspicion.
But where is that suspicion coming from? What's fueling that?
You know, I just think it's a genuine inability for people to communicate with each other. You know, they can't transcend the barriers that they perceive about each other.
Don't you think that the media might be feeding that through their stories?
I mean, it's possible. It could be just a cultural thing, you know. I mean, it could be in the UK, it could be a cultural thing. I mean, you know, look when we went to Palestine, how friendly and warm and hospitable people were. They would invite you into their houses everywhere.
Every weekend.
Everywhere you went, people would literally be dragging you out, you know, into their houses and saying, come and sit with us.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a cultural thing in the UK. The UK has this thing about the stiff upper lip, the kind of the you know, the British reserve, you know, and maybe that's part of it, you know, and also that, you know, people just lead busy lives, so there aren't those opportunities. And then above that, there's a kind of suspicion of minorities, you know, because people think, well, they're different and they're not like us. You know, so they never get to that level of having that conversation to see or to find out or to investigate. Is that necessarily true? You know, because you have to be able to resonate with someone. You have to have something to see common ground.
So what could interrupt this divide? What do we need to do you think?
In my experience, you know, when I look at that, I look back and I look at my childhood. And I look at my experiences after, you know, so we left Coventry, we came to Glasgow, and again, Glasgow was, compared to Foleshill, it was a very white city. Yeah, there were pockets of immigrants living in different areas, but the school I went to was largely white. And, you know, the reception was one of suspicion, I think. There was this inability for people to see this bigger idea that there are more commonalities between us than differences. But in order to experience that, you actually have to do something. There has to be a positive action on your part. It isn't good enough to just listen to people, to listen to the media, to read a book, to, you know, buy a kebab at the kebab shop. You know, that's not going to cut it. You know, you need to actually speak to people. And, you know, and I just always sensed, you know, that we had neighbors who were white, you know, in Coventry, in Glasgow. And I'm just trying to think back if ever I was invited into a white person's house, you know, if I can. And I look at that the other way around. And there were friends of mine who were white that came to my house, you know. But I never remember that. And I don't even think that was because what happens as a result of that is that, you know, communities then coalesce around similarity. You know, it becomes this thing where that's what you get used to. And that's why communities are divided and segregated.
Which is, I mean, it's okay to be
It's
with
fine.
what you
Yeah,
are comfortable with. Yeah.
absolutely fine.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't be underpinned by a suspicion of the other,
Or an aggression.
or an aggression, or a sense of difference. You know, you need to have that conversation around seeing what commonalities are. And I always thought that was quite a, you know, I mean, it was, in a way, you know, I feel a disservice, and maybe even on my side, that, you know, that we lived in segregated communities, largely moved within our own communities. Our friends, largely my friends, were from Pakistani or black background. So, and in a way, it was a disservice on my part, because we knew each other and we didn't really, and, you know, I can understand it, because, I mean, if you're in segregated communities, then you do have that suspicion of other communities. And it's only now, you know, many years later, not now, but many years later, I kind of looked a little bit more deeply into that. And, you know, had more friends who were white and transcended those barriers. But those are deeply ingrained and entrenched. And you still see in the UK, you know, very divided and segregated communities. And still that suspicion, and those conversations not happening, you know. And this what fuels this kind of...
And now that there's this movement towards, you know, online, you know, that this lockdown, which may never end, you know, I think this is ushering in a new era where we're going to talk to each other through media more than we talk face to face. I think that's maybe arrived. It's a dawning of it anyway. That's going to exacerbate the problem.
Of course. Yeah.
I mean, we'll never talk. I mean, if unless you dial the wrong channel.
But I wonder whether I place a lot of emphasis on that. And I think I place a lot of emphasis on it because, in a way, me and you have talked for a long time, and it's broken down a lot of barriers, right?
Yeah,
I mean, over time, it's... whether that's on a political level, on a social level, on a family level, or just on a level of understanding.
You were really good with me. You were really good to me in the beginning. I mean, genuine. This is what we need. We need people. We need to care about each other. And you really, from the first moment you spoke, that's how people respond when they're treated well. You know, and there's just not enough of that.
Yeah.
But it did take action. I mean, you did things for me, and then I've tried to reciprocate, and we need to become engaged.
Yeah. But that's the thing. And I think, you know, I see, you know, looking back, and I think this podcast is just one way of doing that. We're skimming the surface here in a way. But there are many things, you know, that through our experience, I think, have drawn different understandings for me about a lot of different things.
Me too.
You know, and you know how a lot of this works. A lot of things around race, identity, belonging, home, and you know the politics. You know, things that we think, things that we believe, religion, and you know. But those things, I mean, you know, those things only come to be. Friendships are only cemented. I mean, understandings are only made through conversation, through breaking barriers, through sometimes getting into uncomfortable places. You know, and this is the thing I really fear in the world today, that we've created a kind of sense of divisiveness and a space in which those conversations cannot occur.
Well,
you know,
Matt Taibbi wrote a book on why we hate each other. I don't know the whole title, but he talks about how the media is set up now as a model to
divide people.
Well, it's their goal is to make money, and they found that if they can just say have their constituency be of the same mind, and they just feed them information that they already agree with.
Yeah.
Because if you give them information that they don't agree with, they'll leave and they'll go watch a different channel.
Of course,
so you just give them what they already agree with. And it's different from another network that does the same thing with a different set of people. So we've all become entrenched in our thinking,
Yeah.
really, really polarized, and we've lost the ability to talk to the other side because we don't have the language anymore. We don't have the information.
Yeah.
We don't have any shared knowledge that we can even say, okay, we both agree on this.
Yeah.
And so we see each other now as enemies if they disagree.
Yeah.
And this is really scary.
That's scary. It's scary. And I think that's where, something like what we're doing, I see it in, well, I don't know how you see it, but I see it as one way to channel, something more positive around this idea that me and you, we're from very different experiences, and we've just got a little sense of that today. You're from the Midwest, America, you're white. You've had a particular background. I'm from Coventry, England. I had a very different background, different upbringing, different religion at that time, which we'll talk that because Doug's actually Muslim as well. But we've had very different backgrounds, but through that interaction, through having those conversations, through genuinely trying to understand, you begin to reach somewhere, you break through. And in a way, it's like, I read a book a long time ago that was very influential. It's called The Location of Culture. I think we spoke about this once about a guy called Homi Bhabha. And he's a professor of comparative literature, I think, at Kent. Don't know whether he's retired now. And the book was very influential for me, because it said that, we're all posited into these fixed identities in the world. It could be defined by religion, your country of origin, whatever it is, the language you speak, the culture you follow. And he says, the real space, for someone to really truly understand where they are in the world is to move outside that space to a third space, through interaction with things that you perceive as different. Mm-hmm. And it goes, the true human experience comes in at the point in which we're nomadic. We move outside those frameworks which we're very comfortable with. For example, I call myself, I'm a liberal, or I'm an anti-Trump supporter. I really need to find out who Trump is. I need to understand that logic in order to have that conversation. It's not just the media feed me a set of stereotypes and conjectures and rumors and whatever, and I fix my opinion.
It's your own ideology that you need to step outside of.
Yeah,
it's these fixed ideas that then occur to you as just common sense.
Common sense.
Of course it's that way.
Yeah.
It has to be that way. There's no other good way.
Yeah.
Wake up and see it my way.
Yeah.
And you have to.
But I always say to you that and people find it quite strange about me that I like to read everything. I like to watch everything. I feel quite comfortable with that because I really do I genuinely do want to know what people. So if there's a debate around race in the UK and they're saying, there was this guy vilified, he's the leader of Britain Fast, I think is the group's name. They're a right-wing fascist anti-immigration platform they have. And, I wanted to see, who is this guy? What is he actually saying and who does he appeal to and why does he appeal to them? I want to know. I don't want to no platform him. I don't want to disregard what he says because that's
cancel
dangerous.
Cancel, yeah.
For me, that's dangerous.
Yeah, the cancel culture.
But I think people can't get to that place where they often they disagree with something and then they find it's threatening. Like if I even try to explore it, somehow, it's going to affect me or inaffect me.
Well, if your identity, if your ego is founded on this bubble of ideas, then you pop that, it's very destabilizing.
It's disconcerting.
To face the fact that you've been wrong or could have been wrong, some people don't handle that very well.
And the thing is, I guess what I'm trying to say is, and I guess, in a way we're tying this together now, is that, conversation is good. compassion is good, understanding is good, to
Compassion and
cross.
understanding and empathy.
Yeah.
That's what's missing. Really, to understand people's suffering and to know that we're all connected.
Yeah.
If they're suffering, you're not well yourself.
Yeah.
It's really true.
Yeah.
There's a part of you because our spirits are connected.
Of course. Our experiences it's like me and you when we talk about different things, about our experiences, families, whatever. At one level, there's differences. But when you peel away the layers, all families have similar issues. But they may be kind of posited
I want
differently.
to go further than that. We're profoundly similar.
Yeah.
That we take it for granted, just our similarities. And if I name them, you go, "No, that's ridiculous." Of course we have that in common. But there you go.
Yeah.
There's not much really that we have different.
No. And that's the whole thing. And it's trying to experience that part, is to try to see, because it just occurred to me there, one of the reasons I really, and in a way, often you have to buy into this terminology because it's the way we express the world and our feelings. And we get caught up in language. And they used to say, Britain is a multicultural place. And in a way, I used to think to myself, that's quite divisive. Because, that assumes that there are different cultures, right?
Uh-huh.
But when you really look into it, how different are they? There's things that cross over. There's things that may be slightly different. But there's always things on the edges in which cultures are fusing into each other all the time.
Look at the food tastes in the UK, how they've shifted now.
Of
you were
course.
telling me.
Yeah, of course. And even if you look at the cuisine of India and Pakistan, there's so much commonality there. The languages are common.
Yeah.
So what do you say? He's culturally Indian and you're culturally Pakistan. What does that do for you? It kind of sets you apart. We're multicultural. We live in two different... Yes, there are things that are different, but there's far more in common. And by having this idea that everything is multicultural, I could see where they were coming from. They were saying, we want a more stable and cohesive society, so let's recognize different cultures. But that had a really bad effect because people would then be really legitimized into stereotyping. Yeah. So, they'd say, right, you're Pakistani, you must like this, you must be Muslim, and you must be, and they felt comfortable saying that. Although in Pakistan, there are Christians, there are different denominations in Islam, there are Hindus that live here. In fact, there's a couple of doors away, there's a guy, he's from Karachi, he's a Hindu, So you get so many different diverse people. And when you think of Pakistan, what do you think of? Most people will think of the Punjab, but, ethnically, Pakistan has such diversity. You've got people in the north that ethnically look Chinese. You've got people in the west, they've got blonde hair and blue eyes. There's such a diversity. So, just saying there's a culture, and each of these areas in Pakistan in and of itself has a culture, right?
Yeah.
So, in a way, it's like it's a mass delusion to think that there is one culture called Pakistani culture. It's just like American culture. What does that mean?
The South versus the North. You have the mountain people and
and then all the indigenous types of cultures that exist within that, whether that's urban or rural, or whatever it is. You know what I mean? You have all these different fusions and different things going on. And then the subcultures, of people who are kind of outside the main culture. So, well, that's it, I think. I think today... We've kind of explored a few things. What do you think?
Good chat.
Yeah? Do you think we've explored a few things?
This is great.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to capitalize on a few of these issues because we're brushing the surface, I think, of a few of them. We need to, really delve deep.
Yeah, we have time.
Into a few of them. What do you think?
I agree. Let's do it.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Well, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
And, we'll be back. What's our words going to be? What's the end words? Increase the peace. I think that's good.
Yeah, increase the peace.
Increase the peace.
Peace out.
Peace out. Increase the peace.
Yeah. That was good. I hope the camera got it all. Yep, good.